Well, listen up! There is a storm coming! Like nothing you have ever seen! And not a one of you is prepared for it!
There's no more secrets, just ignorance.
In reality, I just question NASA a whole heck of a lot. I don't care what the shape of the Earth is. I just know that NASA's full of crap. But in my flat Earth groups on Facebook, I saw this footage of a Russian lunar lander, which you guys have to look this up, or we'll put it in the edited version of this video. But it's called the Lunokhod 1 lunar lander of the Soviet Union, and it was sent to the moon and landed in 1970, apparently, and it is like a hunk of junk. It looks like a steampunk art project.
Okay, hold on. Well, I heard a good podcast today about CERN, too. Would you break it down into what truly is matter or antimatter? Question.
Science, and I know that they say dark matter is really hard to control
Man of the
and
hour.
contain.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
that's a little scary that they're playing with that.
Well, the one I heard recently was saying if you have a grain,
Okay.
a grain,
matter.
you know, just truly a grain of antimatter or dark matter would be like 4 nuclear warheads.
Yeah.
Have you seen CERN where it's got that Indian god out front of it?
No.
No. Okay, yeah. So that's
a
something that
rabbit
we'll have
hole I
to
have
touch on.
yet
Yeah,
to
with the
explore.
hands, right? Is it the one?
Yeah,
with
yeah.
the
It's
hands?
the god of chaos
Yeah.
or
Destruction.
destruction.
How strange for them to put an occult figure out in front of a scientific facility, research facility that gets like billions of dollars
Well,
from all different countries for their budget, and you know, what does that say about them? You know, like, why Shiva? Why the god of destruction?
Well, the way
You know?
the preacher
I
that I
guess
was listening.
Kali is the god of destruction.
Yeah, this preacher explained it that that there is another god that's in that group of gods, okay, and that when Shiva destroys, this god can recreate.
Oh, right, Brahma and Vishnu.
Exactly. Yep, it's one of
Yeah,
them.
like
I'm not sure
that.
the succession of which god is what.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like a trinity almost in Hinduism. Wow.
Well,
Yeah.
I guess the point being there is that the one can recreate, and by doing CERN, what you're doing is trying to figure out the God particle, the Higgs boson particle, or whatever, but essentially the Big Bang. And if you can, more or less, you're trying to figure out what it is, and by doing that,
it says Brahma is the creator of the universe, while Vishnu is the preserver of it. Shiva's role is to destroy the universe in order to recreate it.
exactly.
Wow.
Wow.
So when you can figure out, you know, say where God, you know, it was His word, He spoke us into existence,
Well,
and
And then for Freemasons, they have this order ab chao, order out of chaos. What do you call it? Idiom, or it's like a tagline. It's in the Masonic dictionary, order out of chaos, and that's kind of what the New World Order is about. They can only bring the new world into existence out of a concocted and constructed state of chaos.
there you
right.
go. So it you know, the way it sounds to me is the way that we're destroying nations and recreating or putting them into the IMF banks and essentially you're back on the hook for a couple $1 billion that you're never ever going to be able to pay back. And this is the way that whoever it may be. I know we talk about political structures of liberals and Democrats and the UK, Brexit, all these different governments. That's to allow us to argue. You know, and ultimately the elites, they've already made a decision. They're just going to allow us to argue it out and make us feel like we have a choice.
Yeah, they plan years ahead of time while we're planning for today.
Exactly. To try to stay on Dave's topic here with you know, why NASA is so controversial, I think he's going to go into the names. into all the different space shuttles. There was Enterprise and I don't know, Columbia, obviously, right? Do you know a few of those, Meeks? You guys know them?
Oh no,
Right.
Challenger.
Challenger.
Yeah, let me look it up. Yeah, they're kind of like named after Greek gods and stuff. And let's see.
Apollo, obviously the Apollo missions.
54.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's the thing. Those are things they do teach us in school, but you realize you don't really pay attention to them.
The shuttle Atlantis.
Atlantis.
Endeavor. Yeah. Oh, Columbia, Challenger, Discovery, Atlantis, and Endeavor. Yeah, it seems like there's a theme for sure.
Right.
But what really struck me is that a lot of the astronauts and a lot of employees of NASA have been Freemasons, and specifically Mormon Freemasons. And a lot of people that are in the know talk about Mormon Freemasonry being, above the regular levels of Freemasonry. They go to the more occult side, actually, when it gets right down to it. And I actually went to art school with a boy who was abused in a Mormon secret society family, and he did paintings of the rituals that he was put through as a kid.
Wow.
And everybody, I just was thinking back to that not too long ago, and I was just thinking, wow, dude, like that was someone I knew that was talking about that stuff. But anyway, so it's just very strange. NASA likes to hire Mormon Freemasons. Should that perk our ears up a little bit? I just think it's interesting to look further into that. And the three most famous astronauts, two of them were Freemasons outwardly. I don't think the third one was, but his dad was. But they unfurled a Freemasonic flag on the moon, they said.
We've grown used to wonders in this century. It's hard to dazzle us. We've grown used to the idea of space, and perhaps we forget that we've only just begun. We're still pioneers. They, the members of the Challenger crew, were pioneers. The future doesn't belong to the faint-hearted. It belongs to the brave.
Send it to Charles right now.
We had one weird thing happen last week.
Just one weird thing. That's a good thing.
Yeah, that's pretty good, right? Yeah.
Good week.
What
If
happened?
only one weird thing happened, then that's a good
What
week.
was the
right?
weird thing for you this week?
For me? Nothing really weird.
Something weird happened this week, man. Don't you remember?
My whole life is kind of weird, so it's weird to other people may
Really?
not be
How
that
weird?
weird to me. So
Yep.
How we doing that on that email, Meegs? Do you guys know that
Sent it right-
Charles has
right now, just sent it.
172,000 unread emails?
Really?
wow. See, now we're all up in your business.
Yep.
See?
Yeah. You don't want to get spammed. You just
Wait a minute,
keep
what's
some-
this? Hair Club for Men.
Oh, very funny. Penile
Customer of the
enlargement
month.
pills.
I'm kidding, folks. I'm kidding. This is what you get when you help me, as I embarrass you on air. All right. So, NASA. Does anyone here not understand the concept of NASA being controversial?
The concept.
I mean, have we ever heard? I just want to make sure we've all in our lives have at least come across once.
Oh, sure.
NASA, there's something weird going on in NASA.
I mean, the only thing primarily that I've ever looked into is like how they may have faked the moon landing and stuff like that, but I don't really know too much besides that. You have a fresh brain to lay it on.
Okay, good. Yeah, that's interesting stuff because that's like a positive conspiracy. Like, why would they? Twin Towers, okay, I could understand. They're going to cause destruction. They're bad guys. Why would they do something that makes us feel good, that's an accomplishment, which may or may not have been faked? We're going to look into that.
Well, it was a big thing about the war, right, or the Cold War.
Is she right? Because I know that's the popular version of what went on there. I know a lot of people like to believe that.
Well, that's the story they tell. Oh, we're in a race with the
Right.
Russians, and we got to beat them to spare, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
Yes, of course.
War
War fuels all agenda. I mean, it's interesting because remember Werner von Braun. We're going to talk about him today because he's like, right now it's the Cold War. And we'll do a show on the Cold War later.
Sure.
But completely staged. Completely. I mean, Russia should have collapsed financially. And guess who kept them propped up? Well, funny, it was the U.S. through the central bankers.
Imagine
so what
that.
happened is companies like Mobil, defense contractors, are actually doing business with Russia, selling them the very weapons that they're then giving to the North Vietnamese or the North Koreans, both wars, and they're also selling them to our soldiers. And this is this is what they're on both sides of the equation. They're never on a national border.
Industrial complex.
What country is always neutral in war?
Switzerland.
And where are these guys based?
Ah.
Oh, yeah.
See, there we go.
How funny
Another
can
aha
a country?
moment.
Can you just? I mean, Hitler's invading everyone in the 1930s. September 1st, 1939. He begins by invading Poland, and then he invades Austria, and he just invades. Like, how does a country just get to go? Oh, we're on Ghoul. You can't get. We're just declaring we're neutral.
Right.
What? It's like when you're about to get into a gang fight, you go, I'm neutral, guys. They will laugh you.
Oh yeah.
They will laugh your teeth right out of your mouth. Okay. Couple things. I want to give some appreciation to KJ and Meeks, and I really respect this, and I'm giving you guys some props as a message also to everyone. And there's going to be an apology woven into this, but you guys both. KJ especially, twice, you came up to me and you're like, Dave, when you talk about your personal life and your ex and things, it just sounds just crappy. And I went back.
It's a mama bear in me.
I listened to myself, and you were, it's just not, you were right.
Very uncouth.
I was embarrassed. My dad would have been embarrassed. It's not, it's almost like it's just a habit.
Right.
And,
Can I interrupt because a friend?
no,
because
I'm about to say sorry. But hang on one sec. all right, let's hear about your friend.
My friend
Now let me
listened to the
forget
entire show, and the one thing he talked about was your story that he liked. How you?
Oh, great! Just when
That's
all
That's
right,
the
looks
one
like
thing
we
he
will be
promotes.
talking
Yeah.
about your bets. No, I'm kidding. I'm sorry to you guys for wasting your time on that stuff. And bets, I'm sorry for you too. I normally like to dwell on the positive in people.
Yeah, that's right.
And this-
Positive.
Betsy's a good mom. She's a good, attentive, engaged mom with Brady, and he's very lucky to have her. And so let's just leave that at that.
There you go.
So thank you,
God
Meeks,
bless you,
and thank
Bets.
you, KJ, for honestly being straight with me.
Sure.
I mean, I love just ridiculous. The
That's what
truth
friends
is
are for.
always easier than stuff.
Right.
All right, so I was going through a couple quotes last night, and I thought this one was interesting. I've always liked this one. We all know Isaac Newton, right?
I know of him.
What do you guys? What's he known for in your mind?
Newton meter? Is it measurement?
Gravity, I think. Right?
Big bars.
Meeks, you talk a little louder. Fig bar. What was that? An ad from when we were
Mine
kids?
might be that
Fig
close.
Newton.
Yeah.
Oh, a fig Newton. Like a fig bar.
He's the
Isaac
gravity
Barr.
dude.
All right. So he actually spent more time studying the scriptures in the Bible than anything else, more than mathematics, physics, philosophy, you name it. And he was very well versed and very much a believer in the Bible. I mean, there's a lot of quotes. Now we look at it, oh, he's from the 1700s. They didn't know jack anything. My argument is that this generation is actually the one that is deceived, thinking we know a lot more. But just like the Bible said, we are going to essentially be dumber than any other people that have ever been here, which I totally get. We are.
Yep. Calculators.
So, just by reading the scriptures, Newton made this prediction, and this was in 1687. He said, and I actually, on a personal level, I'm like, I think this would be me. Probably everyone in this room. About the time of the end, a body of men will be raised up who will turn their attention to the prophecies and insist upon their literal interpretation in the midst of much clamor and opposition. Well, I can tell you for sure the clamor and opposition is real. The literal, that is real. And, you know, everyone used to call humanity men back then. They're used to talking about men and women.
Collective.
It basically, he's like, there's going to be a spiritual awakening right at the end. And people are going to wake up to the Bible, and suddenly all these people that are like normal people in the world are going to switch whatever they're doing, and they're going to do this because they know something.
Time is short.
So these are. Do you guys like our new little?
I just noticed that the little border around the.
Yeah. I was about to say shit's getting official, but I'm not swearing.
Oh.
Starting now.
Starting now. It is.
The backstory, this is out of a book that has been written, but it's Newton is yet another brilliant scientist of his time, like Einstein for our generation, who was certain of the existence of God. He spent more time studying the scriptures than he did physics. By studying, he predicted the phenomenon which is manifesting all over Earth, really since about the early 1990s. It's not a growth in religion; it's a growth in people are waking up. And there's some groups that actually study this. Look into Barna, and we'll get into that later. He also talked about how there's going to be this explosion of knowledge in the last days, and he got that out of the Book of Daniel. It was written 2,000 years before him.
Newton.
It was written 600 B.C.
Hold on. Newton found the passages in Daniel or in prophecies?
Well, Daniel is a very prophetic book.
Okay.
And that Daniel goes back to 600 or so BC from Babylon. And what he predicted about the future, Daniel writes that, essentially in the next 600 years, the Babylonians are going to fall. Then the Persians are going to, Medo-Persia is going to rise, which happens. Okay, pretty good, 1 for 1. Then he also said the Greeks are going to rise and conquer the Persians. That happened. He even didn't mention them by name, but said this young king, this is Alexander the Great, is going to conquer a whole bunch of stuff, but then his kingdom won't hold and is going to be divided into 4 pieces. Strange prediction for, 600 BC. We flash forward, and it's because the king dies young. He doesn't bequeath his kingdom to anyone. His top 4 generals take over.
Split it
the
up.
4 parts. They end up kind of warring with each other. Split into 4. They lose their power base. Now come the Romans. And he then also predicted that Rome won't be conquered, but it will go hidden. Its power base will remain intact. Now, to say this 600 years before Christ, and to be able to now have the information we have to go back and see that this, in fact, did happen just as it was written, and it was 600 BC. We now know this. Mm-hmm. And there's thousands of examples like that. It's incredible.
Man. See, just stop for a second. That's what I mean, coming as a student is because even reading it, I don't see it. I can't link it to something that happened. Like watching it through. Yeah, you have to make sure that you're constantly seeking.
There's a line in there somewhere. It says, I'm going to screw up the line, and maybe Meigs, you can figure it out, but it's somewhere along the lines of, it's for God to hide treasures and kings to seek them out. And I wouldn't be surprised if there's more design in that book, because you can't, and this might have a lot to do with why God doesn't come down and do a light show for us, because that'd be so easy. But it's counterfeitable, but, it'd be easy. Like if Jesus showed up in my bedroom tonight and I believed it was him, I would do whatever he said.
Right.
Go over to Helen's house and steal all her money. All right, you say so.
Gotta do what I gotta do.
It's Proverbs 25:2.
What is this?
It is the glory of God to conceal things, but the glory of kings is to search things out.
So that's God's way of saying that he's hidden a lot of little nuggets. And it's unbelievable because it's only been in modern day, now that we've got the ability to crunch numbers, because God has got messages buried underneath the surface of the Bible. So do you guys know what letter skipping sequences are? So if you take, like, for instance, every 7th letter of a message, it has a message inside of it that someone doesn't know unless they're looking, what does every 7th letter,
Right.
He's got messages like that all over this book.
Ooh.
That just are, it's just one of the many, many indicators when you look at the mathematical probability that this was written by a man and these numbers tie up so perfectly. It's another thing that establishes the fact that this thing was not written by humans. Well, he operates in 7s. So you've got conventions of 7 for almost everything. And what happens is I'm not going to give a good example. And Meigs, if you can think of one, go for it. But one prophet, he'll be talking about 3 of the 7 units. Another prophet, he'll be talking about 2 of the 7 units. And another prophet, he'll be talking about 2 of the other. And it's cumulatively, I know one. In the New Testament, book of Matthew, very specifically says that they went fishing. And Meigs, do you remember the number of fish they caught? 153 or 157.
Oh, I totally forgot.
Let's go with 153. I'm not sure the exact number. Doesn't mean much, right? But whenever God uses a specific number like that, there's something going on every time. And it just so happens, so Jesus is doing this metaphor where he's just meeting some of his disciples, and he tells the fishermen ones, he's like, throw that net back over, because they could not catch anything. They end up catching 153 fish, which is a metaphor for them, because Jesus was going to make them fishers of men,
right.
not fishers of fish. And these guys ended up, when you add up the 4 books of the gospel, and you need to add all 4 books of the gospel up, written in different continents, 100 years apart, not able to cross-reference what the other guy wrote because they were wrote simultaneously. You take all of the miracles, all the saved people in the 4 gospel, it adds up to 153. And there's thousands of little signs like that where, like, whoa. Once it could be an accident, probability.
It's like cracking the little Annie code.
But when you start to look more deeply, and basically every time there's something like that, you will go find this affirmation. And that's why guys, even like Isaac Newton, men of science and math, the world was just getting round from flat at the time.
There you go, Meigs.
And he's still... he knew that the Bible's, and it's happening still today at the highest scientific levels, but we never hear from those guys. We hear from Michio Kaku and Rob Greene and Bill Nye and a few guys that are just always on television as quote-unquote the voice of science.
Yeah.
But they're really just the voice of the Illuminati.
Yeah, it's just really a character role that they're playing. It is for that Nye guy. That guy's a fruitcake.
Oh gosh. And then we look down on these scientists' involvement in the occult and alchemy, but that is actually, because you can see right on Wikipedia, like Newton was involved in study of the occult and alchemy as well as, the Bible. But this didn't go away. This just went underground, these alchemical matters and, chemical transformations of metal and stuff. That's what they learn in Freemasonry and the mystery schools. They just don't teach it in our 6th grade science class,
Yeah, he was definitely an alchemist. And keep in mind also, Meigs, we also study the occult. So I wouldn't...
Doesn't mean he's bad.
I believe
he's
we're going to see Isaac Newton in heaven. Victory in life versus failure. I've been trying to get this out for a few weeks. I'm just going to finish it right now. Because all I got to was what failure in life would be. Which is, if you have all the riches in the world and all the things, that the world tells you are good, from good, nice houses, nice bank accounts, good sex, and good cars, and yada yada yada. If you don't get to heaven, your life was a failure. And the flip side of that is, no matter what sort of curveballs have been thrown at you in this life, if you find out how to get to heaven, no matter how crappy this life has been or what sins you think you've committed, it will be a victory. And I can think of nothing more important in any individual's life. I mean, I did not get this until I was 40, whatever.
I look at it as learning. I never sin. I'm learning. And the
Learning
more
to
that
sin?
I pay attention to God, the more I learn.
Gotcha. Yeah.
That's the way I do it. So.
Yeah.
Positive thinking.
Look,
Well, I
God-
mean, even
Go ahead.
I'm just saying, very simple. I could be listening to the Gospels in the car, and then some dude cuts me off, and next thing you know, here comes 47 words out of my mouth, and then I'm like, oh, I'm so sorry. I can't believe I just did that. You lose it like that, ready to snap on somebody, a road rage.
Sometimes on air.
Don't
Sometimes
drive
on
angry.
air. Yeah. No, you have to make a conscious effort, and then when it happens, you just you
Well, you
say you're
gotta
sorry.
have the yin
Back
and
off.
the yang. They say if you don't know pain, you don't know pleasure. So.
Oh, without a doubt.
Yeah.
And how really, I mean, God knows everything, but how could our faith or love, really for him, let's say, ever be tested if there weren't trials?
Right.
I will get into that later. That's very
Yep, gotcha.
philosophical,
Yep.
but that's a really good point. Something did, at least in my book, happen this week that was way strange, KJ. Can I show that? By the way, has anyone seen my friend Catherine today? Is this me anything?
Nope.
I think she's coming by with a gift for you. So,
I'm like in the air about
can
all
I
this.
tell
You
her-
get what's going on?
Can I
So-
tell him this? Do you know what I'm talking about?
No.
Okay.
You're freaking me out,
No,
man.
remember the 3:15 a.m. text last week?
I do.
All right, so I'm having a psycho day last week.
Do I want to admit that I remember or that I don't remember? No.
All right, so last
No.
week, all right, I'm just gonna scroll through this, and if we don't want it on the edited show, I'll
Okay.
take it down.
Oh,
And I'm gonna
no big
share the
deal.
text that was sent to me while I was on the phone with Meeks.
Okay.
And one of the things we were talking about was the show. Literally, I think we were talking about you and Meeks. This was our 5-hour conversation.
It was epic.
And just so you guys, stuff
lot-
goes
lot
on behind
goes
the
in.
scene. There was, I don't know what that was from. It felt like 3 a.m. to, I know it was daylight
The
when we got off
witching
the
hour.
Editing the shows.
phone. So last week, we were kind of teasing KJ, but not. I mean, this is actually great news for us, where she was like, well, I'm giving it up to God. Let's just see what happens. And she started off by getting a package on your porch.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. And then you're like, wow, good things are already happening.
Yeah.
And the Meeks are all like, I'm not sure if that is. Okay, you
It
guys
happens
remember
that
having
quick.
that
Yeah.
conversation.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Flash forward 9 hours. So I'm on the phone with Meeks, and we're in the middle of this call. And I get a text message from my friend, Catherine. Now,
I
if you
remember.
notice, the last time I talked to Catherine was a week before Thanksgiving. All right, I have not spoken to her now in going on 4+ months, 5 months. I get a message right at 3:15, the day, and I know how Catherine works. This is not like her.
Right.
This is not. She does not stage things or do things for like a show like this. So I actually think she's talking to the wrong person. Like, are you serious? But that's how she started the message. She's like, she's actually talking to me like she's upset with me because basically her message, I'm just going to read it. Are you serious? God woke me up in the middle of the night to tell me to buy gifts for your stripper friend. I'm guessing she's talking about you because you've shared your former life. I ordered her a big oversized sweatshirt that says Jesus loves me and my tattoos, a water bottle that says be still and know I am the Lord, and an ESV study Bible. He even told me to put in that note that this is the kind of clothing and trinkets Jesus would approve of. Let me know how I can get it to you. She says I'm going to bed.
That's awesome.
So at 3:15,
It's so sweet
More
of
gifts.
you.
Don't tell me I'm putting $1 into the jar for this, because I just wasn't thinking this was good. So I basically
Holy beep.
responded with, wow, that's very surprising. And
Wow.
she's now joking with me. She's like, I don't know why this couldn't have waited.
That is-
Right.
That's
But literally,
wild.
Woke her up.
I'm going to find out the details, because I ended it with, I understand your assignment, because this stuff happens all the time. When you start to wake up to God,
Start paying attention. Yep.
this is what I mean by weird stuff. I did not call her, and I have not contacted her. Something motivated. We've had lots of guests on the show.
Sure.
Something motivated her that day, like right after and while Meegs and I were literally talking about KJ in that moment, about KJ,
See, that's all the good stuff, man.
and boom, it comes in. And Meegs, am I making this up, or was this real?
No, not at all.
So weird.
That's wonderful.
I was like, I almost fell off my chair. I was like,
Should we
what?
look at it?
Oh, the gift?
Yeah.
Yeah, let's do it. Bring it out.
Awesome.
Oh, you have it in studio? That's so cool.
Oh, wow.
Oh, that's cool.
Wow.
Very cool.
Jesus
Yep.
loves me.
Nice comfy sweater.
My tattoos.
That thing looks
That's
cool, man.
cool.
That is, Catherine, I don't know if
Very
you're
cool,
listening.
Catherine.
That's beautiful.
Awesome.
And it's
Someone
supposed to be the cup.
just
That's
got
very
herself
nice.
a glass of wine
I feel like
tonight.
it's my birthday.
I know.
My goodness.
To your new life, it is
Hey.
yours.
Oh,
Yeah.
neat. Oh,
All right,
cool.
Catherine just moved up, and Catherine is a stud, by
Very
the way.
cool.
She's very
That
much
is
like
awesome.
you've met Catherine.
And
I have
there's
met her,
more.
yep.
But wait, there's more. There's a student study Bible.
Hey.
yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Cool.
It's weird how
And
people
That
like
is cool.
this is how this stuff works. And Helen, I think I was saying it to you.
there's a lot of stuff in here.
You'll have
Very
the
nice.
back.
That goes up
People
one
that you don't even know will have your back, and there's more loyalty than in a mafia, literally.
Yeah. Aw.
Dude, all right, now I'm getting a little jealous because
Thank you.
you sure none of that in there says give to Dave?
See, Jesus is looking out for
Really
you.
neat. And then there's
Sending
a letter.
people your
which
way.
I should probably,
Oh yeah.
Yep.
probably read it personally.
Yes.
Let's say.
Well, at least maybe screen it now while I tell you a
Okay.
couple things about
Yeah.
Catherine,
Okay.
because she's got this very similar story to a lot of us at this table.
Oh, that's a big letter. You might
a
want
long
to wait.
one.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. She's
So
yeah.
It's probably personal.
That's
to
a lot
me
of
too.
love. That's
Thank you,
great.
Catherine.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Catherine.
She is an entrepreneur. She's a lawyer, University of Michigan grad. Smart. She also, like we have, has had a good party life. She knows both sides of the fence. She's
Yep.
just as comfortable, dealing on the street as she is in a boardroom. And she's just another person.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't want to take away her story because I think she's coming on air next week. So,
Ooh, that would be awesome.
Yeah.
but she essentially a few years back was given less than 6 months to live, and it was a liver issue, and it was one of those because livers don't repair themselves.
Right.
And I'm probably going to ruin this story, so we got to let her retell it properly. But again, there's some things about this story. This is what got her to something happened to her that was so real. She saw it with her own eyes. She knows it, and it's the difference again between someone telling you they saw a car accident and you seeing it. Very different emotional response, because she's now on this donor list, and she's got the prognosis is wrap up your affairs essentially, and she's like, wow, my life's over. This really turned out, whatever that
don't
does to a
expect
person.
that.
I have no
Yeah.
idea what that.
Yeah.
And I think she prayed in that moment, because I don't think she was very Christian, or maybe even at all. She'll have to explain that. And something like within a day, because the doctors are coming in, and they're basically just saying, that we're just going to wind down your life and whatever dialysis. I don't know exactly what.
Right.
And this nurse comes in at one point, and the nurse's name is Grace, and gives her this message saying, I think you're going to be fine, or something along those lines, and whatever. About an hour or two later, these doctors walk in, and they're like looking at her test results, and they're like, I know we must have made a mistake. And they go back, and they test her again, and they're like, they do not know what has happened, and they're like, your liver function just went from 5% to 90%, and there is no...
Logic.
I mean,
There's no logic.
I mean, I know our testing's right. We verified that. We verified this. And Catherine's like, I thought you guys sent Grace in to tell me. And they're like, who's Grace? I'm like, Nurse Grace. She just came in a couple of hours ago to tell me. And they're like, Grace, do you know a Grace?
Oh, my God.
And there's no Grace anywhere. So that's the kind of, so that happens to her.
That's
like
wild.
when that moment happens where you're like, oh, okay.
And
the-
just got real.
And a lot of doctors get saved because they see that very thing too. Some just keep attributing it to, random, like it's bound to happen.
Yeah.
But come on. If you're going to rely on science to tell you how the world works, you've got to have it explain everything. How does it explain that?
No,
Now,
those are the...
that ties into what we're going into, which is also... KJ, you're having a good day today. We got one more thing for you. So I've been wanting to get this thing on. Has anyone ever seen the water experiments by Maruto Emoto? What was his name?
Yes.
Dr. Emoto.
Masaru Emoto. Yes or no?
Yes.
No.
All you guys have all seen this.
No.
Classic.
I've seen
What, when they
something
fill the
about
different
it
levels of the cups up?
where it
Is that what
shows
it is?
frequency or
No,
music.
You use the frequency to change the water.
Yeah,
Oh,
frequencies.
Okay. When you speak, it changes the vibrations of energy.
Oh.
Okay. That was unbelievable. So this is the guy. He was a photographer, and he started doing these experiments of taking microscopic photographs. And he discovered this on accident. He discovered that water subjected to positive thoughts. And we're going to actually show you images of what happens to water when it is exposed to different thoughts and different prayers. This is really interesting because I discovered something I did not know yesterday. Water that's subjected to positive thoughts formed beautiful crystals, and water exposed to negative thoughts formed either no crystals or these heinous looking things. So KJ a few weeks ago had said, you'd made this intuitive comment that feelings is behind matter. And, you know, I just go into science mode immediately, go, no, it's matter, man, magnetic fields and stuff. But you were actually more right than not, because let's take a look at some of these images. But actually, this paragraph right here, Charles, is what you were talking about. And this blows me away. His further research showed that different thoughts could be stored in water and have a positive effect on the human body, just as he experienced with the removal of his foot pain. Lots of people think this is ridiculous, like I would have. I don't anymore, because there's a lot more things going on in this world that we don't understand. And he also talks about magnetic fields and other forms of energy that are a lot more important than gas. Just a few examples. Heavy metal music, kind of distorted. You're screaming, I hate you, I will kill you. Now keep in mind, if you have negative thoughts about yourself, and you realize our body is 70% water.
Yes, that's exactly what I was thinking.
Because you're Captain Positive over here.
Yeah.
And I will tell you this, like, when you imagine things, you can actually, for instance, improve your coordination at catching a football by imagining yourself catching a football.
That's true.
Because the little synapses that are used for that activity are actually, they're now communicating, and they're getting strengthened.
It's like working out.
It's like, when your coach said, dude, you got to envision the game. This is what they're talking about. So by the time you actually play in the game, every play has already happened in your head. It's not like you're not in undiscovered territory. Do you understand?
I live manifestation. In the morning when I wake up, I plan my day out by thinking about awesome things that could happen.
Yeah, the good.
See, there you go.
Yeah. Okay, so we got a few examples there. Music that seems to be appealing to water, like Bach works.
What does the one on the bottom there say?
Which one?
The one that looks like a snowflake.
This one, Fujiwara Dam. That was after a prayer. So on the
After
left,
prayer.
this image right here is, so this dam breaks and it kills and Meigs, maybe you could tell us about Fujiwara Dam, but something bad happened to it. He studied the water crystals from that event, and that's what this box is. And then a prayer was offered over them. And what type of prayer is important? Because I believe this guy was a Buddhist. And we're going to look at something that blew me away. I had to double check this. But it's weird. A prayer, and I can tell you this, there are times where, I mean, it's sometimes not as effective as like a Vicodin, but there are times where a prayer makes you feel better, like literally, palpably.
It's kind of weird. That image kind of looked like a brain scan. No, go back up to the one. Yeah. The one that you were saying is for a prayer?
Yeah.
The snowflake-looking one?
Yeah.
Yeah. Just weird.
Is this one? The Adolf Hitler one looked like it actually had a picture of a dude in it. You can't see, but that's like his nose. That's his eye. There's his other eye. There's the bridge of his nose.
They call it Adolf Hitler? That's just what they're calling it?
No, that's the word they use. So what he did in these experiments is he'd bring these actors in, and they wouldn't even necessarily, so they're acting the emotions. Now, we're going to still feel a little bit, even when acting.
Okay, gotcha.
But he'd bring these actors in to say, I love you, or I hate you, or Adolf Hitler, or whatever. And as he's doing it, he's photographing what happens to these water crystals at just a at a cellular, atomic or subatomic level.
Wow.
So here's the one that I thought was interesting, and I had to like double check this. So when you, I don't know if this was thoughts or words, but when you're surrounded, when you're with someone that actually cares about you and loves you, even if they're saying nothing, you're going to feel good. Now, do you guys ever have a feeling, have you ever been in a relationship where when someone walks into a room, it's like your hair stands up a little bit?
Yeah.
You guys
Oh, yeah.
I wouldn't be surprised if what's going on underneath is maybe this.
Exhibit comes to us from Japan and Mr. Masuro Emoto. Mr. Emoto became terribly interested in the molecular structure of water and what affects it. Now, water is the most receptive of the 4 elements. Mr. Emoto thought perhaps it would respond to non-physical events. So he set up a series of studies, applied mental stimuli, and photographed it with a dark field microscope. This first picture is a picture of water from the Fujiwara Dam. And this picture is the same water after receiving a blessing from a Zen Buddhist monk. Now, in this next series of pictures, Mr. Emoto printed out words, taped them to bottles of distilled water, and left them out overnight. This first photograph is a picture of the pure distilled water, just the essence of itself. These subsequent photographs, as you can see, are each different. This is the chi of love. Now, Mr. Emoto speaks of the thought or intent being the driving force in all of this. The science of how that actually affects the molecules is unknown, except to the water molecules, of course. And it's really fascinating when you keep in mind that 90% of our bodies are water.
Guys, we should do our own experiment. We should set up a rice experiment and try it, and set up an anger rice and a love rice and a Buddhist rice and a Jesus rice.
A what?
Rice?
Rice.
Like rice-a-roni?
Oh yeah, because they did rice experiments instead of water, and they told things to the rice, like good things, and then they screamed at the rice and said, "I hate you, rice." And then they recorded the mold that grew on the rice. Nothing grew.
Oh, I thought you were going to say the rice turned into a Maserati. I'm like, sweet! Discount.
Imagine how crazy people would think we're sitting there talking about rice bowl.
Oh, yeah. Well,
You're a good bowl of rice. Oh, look at you. You're awesome. You're going to have a great day, Rice.
Dr. Emoto has conducted another interesting experiment. He placed rice into 3 glass beakers and covered it with water. And then every day for a month, he said, Thank you to one beaker. You're an idiot to the second. And the third one, he completely ignored. After 1 month, the rice that had been thanked began to ferment, giving off a strong, pleasant aroma. The rice in the second beaker turned black. And the rice that was ignored began to rot.
No, that's what they did. It's instead of water, they used rice, and the results are very similar, Dave. It's just this.
No, I've seen, and there are unbelievable formations formed based on the frequency. So let's look at what happens to water when it's subjected to frequency. Now, the fact that I don't know, maybe you guys have all seen this, and but for me, this is like, wow, I had not seen this until probably 2 months ago. And if you really think about this, what this vibration can do to this water, if you really think about it and understand, this proves that we should have water-driven automobiles. Let's just see what a guy did in his home, in his backyard with this water thing. We don't need sound for it. I think we're just going to see it. So this guy sets up this vibrating thing in his house. Mm-hmm. He's going to show us what happens to water when it is subjected to all these different frequencies. And I was blown away that you can make water do this with sound. Yeah. Huh. Have you guys seen this before?
No.
I haven't seen this.
I have. It's amazing.
Wow.
Think about that. Now, the people we're up against have had this technology for thousands of years, and they've hid it away from us. Who knows what it's going to come out, but...
Oh, man.
That's crazy.
Is that not nuts?
Yeah,
looks like a Fukushima to me. I mean, if it's on a military level, why couldn't you push it?
I lost my mind when I saw this for the first time. I was like, well, jeez, man, why didn't we learn about this in science class? Frequencies was not in the conversation at all. No talk of frequencies.
I know. Because I think that's where, that's going to be the technology used against us that's going to seem like it is from another world. This, to me, is astounding that this exists.
Well, I've said it.
A thing.
Yeah, I've seen their LRADs or microwave weapons that, it's a sound that'll make you sick to your stomach. They use them in prisons where they'll drop you to the floor. They don't ever have to put their hands on you. Mm-hmm. But when you look at something like this, I mean, look what you could do. I mean, if it's really on a military level, you could create a tidal wave.
And again, if our bodies are 70% water, I mean, gosh.
What's that, Meeks?
And if our bodies are mostly water, think about how frequencies are affecting the water in our bodies. And that's why people are really up in arms about 5G now, but that's a whole other conversation. But certainly frequencies and electromagnetism, Tesla technology certainly should have had a more of a prevalence in our 6th grade science education, in my opinion. Yeah. But they keep it from us. They really do.
Meigs, there's a medical procedure. It's kind of weird. It kind of looks like Scientology auditing, the machine you do, but it runs frequencies through your body. And then what they could do is it'll pick up all these things in a kind of like a computer program, and they have frequency water that they'll send to you, so let's say you're having gallbladder issues. It'll be something specifically frequencied to that issue to try to push it out of your body.
They can both heal and harm with it. And their technology is the point now where they can target DNA types, blood types. And I think they can even go down to the individual when you consider the chemtrail nanos that we have all over us that identify us. But essentially, if they want to just disrupt you, put you in a bad mood, make you cranky, they can do it, and you'll never know what's happening.
Wow.
Richard Lighthouse is a guy that talks a lot about this, about how they do this in relation to targeted individuals. But that's a whole other issue.
I see that Nano is essentially creating us as our own 5G, where they could bounce the signals off of us. You know what I mean? To keep that type of a signal.
If this is true, I have got a great reason for the 200 times I have lost my temper in the last 5 years.
Oh, yeah.
I might be
that's it.
I might be clear.
Yep. Yeah. Psychological warfare.
Okay. You know what an Ouroboros is, Meeks?
Yes, it's a occult symbol. It's a snake eating itself. And I think it represents birth and rebirth, and I'm not exactly sure. I know it's very occulty.
It's like the Egyptian equivalent of the infinity sign. Mm-hmm. It is a demonic symbol. It comes right out of Satan. Has had 6 kingdoms, major ones that the Bible talks about. And if you look at all of the common imagery and symbolism, the stuff that we look at, all of it comes just from those 6 kingdoms.
Shall we talk about this? The Orin.
When did you get that thing done?
Orin.
About 8 years ago.
So what does the Orin mean?
The Orin is the symbol from the movie The Never-Ending Story.
Okay.
The kid wears it around his neck.
Okay.
That's the only reason I got it. It has nothing to do with like satanic anything.
Right.
When you look at all of the myriad of symbols that these guys use, at the end of the day, all the symbols trace back to really one of 4 places. And it's Babylon, where you've got the eagle, the raven, the phoenix, that's where that came from. Mm-hmm. The Greek gods, which were nothing more than demons fighting each other for power. And that's how Satan operates his system, human side and demonic side. I don't think those were mythical wars. I actually think those were more real. The writings of Socrates, Aristotle, the Greek tragedy writers. And I read this when we were doing the quotes book that we were just drawn from, because I would have never read Aristotle. I mean, come on, dude, put a gun to my head, please. But that stuff was fascinating. And they were either crazy, like we are, or they really believed that there are these entities that are dark. Jesus Christ had not shown up on the scene yet. The Hebrews were there. And it's interesting because even like Marcus Aurelius, who is the emperor of Rome, about 100+ years after Jesus was in town, and in the beginning of his writings, he's talking about pleasing the many gods, making the right sacrifices to the right God so he can win some battle. And you're now dipping into the dark side, and you're just hoping that your dark angel or your white witch is more powerful than the spirit summoned from the other one. And that's really all you're banking on. I mean,
a lot of wars are
and
fought
at the end of the day, the spirit that is in, like you and Meigs, for instance, is just a way, way, way more powerful spirit. And just wait till we're going to give you a bunch of testimonies from people that were in witchcraft, that were warlocks, they would summon up these. Who's that one dude we were talking about, Meigs? They will summon up.
Oh, it was an ex-Satanist. There's so many testimonies of ex-Satanists that are worth listening to that have become born-again Christians because they realized they could not send demons that would attack Christians. They were summoning up demonic entities, literally, who would not go after Christians.
Yeah, this guy was the head of a coven, and there's a lot of stories like this, and his name escapes me. We'll put a little snippet in. But this guy was lifelong in the dark arts, plain and simple. They summoned the spirit, whatever you do. I don't even want to... I don't even like to repeat in research, by the way.
The Book of Necronomicon and whatever.
Yeah, the Necronomicon.
Yeah, I can't even say it.
So the spirit goes over and is about to mess with this person's life. And we'll get into the details of how they do that later. But instead, this thing comes back pissed off, basically going, don't you ever send me to a Christian's house again. And in that moment, this guy converted. He's like, whoa, wait a minute. This Christianity is more powerful. Those spirits are more. And then he knew the spiritual world was real. He just thought he was on the right side.
And I mean, we did everything. We summoned up demonic spirits to go out and do what we wanted them to do. You see, Satan in Satanism, the Satanists don't actually do anything. You summon up the spirits to go out and do it for you. I got to tell you a story. I got to tell you this, because if you're born again Christian, you're spirit filled. I mean, you need to know how powerful the name of Jesus is. You do. You need to know about the blood of Jesus Christ. We summoned up a spirit, and the reason we did that is one night one of the witches came in. One of the young witches came in, and she said, "There's a lady down the street who's a Christian, and she's threatening to expose us, threatening to expose our group." And I said, "Well, we've got the police department, the sheriff's department. I mean, there's no problem there." She goes, "No, you don't understand. She's going to tell my mother." I said, "Oh, okay. Well, what do you want us to do?" "Well, let's just hurt her a little bit. Let's put a hex on her. Not a big one, just a little one." I said, "Oh, you mean send something after her just to make something happen to let her know we're there?" She said, "Yes." "Okay, we can do that." So what we did is we got in the circle and we summoned up a spirit named Astaroth. Now, this is supposed to be one of the hierarchy of the demons. And over in the side of the room, this orange cloud started appearing. And as it appeared, there started appearing a face out of that cloud. And we told it what we wanted it to do. We sent it off, and it was gone. We came out 5 minutes later, came out of the circle, everybody talking, having a good time. We were getting ready to break the meeting up. All of a sudden, this orange cloud started appearing in the side of the room again. And I looked at it and I said, "Oh, everybody back in the circle, quick." We got back in the circle, and this cloud appeared again. This time, this thing was in a rage. I mean, it was angry. And it spoke to me just like I'm speaking to you tonight. I mean that audibly. And it said, "Don't you ever send me after a Christian again." And I'm telling you, I mean, that's the power. This woman must have had the blood of Jesus all over her. You know, must have had the blood of Jesus all over her. I think that was probably my biggest turning point. Because I'm sitting there now thinking, wait a minute. We're supposed to be the ones in control. We're supposed to have all the power. And all of a sudden, here's a demon spirit telling us don't send it after Christians?
And God loves pure hearts. I mean, who was God's greatest disciple? Jesus' greatest disciple. Meeks, who would you say it is?
Peter?
Well, I don't know. Peter is a good. Paul, probably.
What did Paul, before he was Paul, what was he called?
Saul.
Right, Saul of Tarsus. And what was his job?
Fisherman. He was a killer of Christians.
Think about it.
He was a murderer.
Doesn't make sense. Why would God go convert someone as a killer of Christians? And this guy worked for the Pharisees. I mean, his job was, the Pharisees would say, "Hey, these Christians are heretics. Go kill them." And Saul of Tarsus is like, "Okay." See, and this is why we don't even have the capability to judge humans. See, because the intent of his heart was to do good. And he was killing people, but he was murdering God's people. But God will look at someone like that and go,
orders.
"You have a pure heart. Like, you're not a..." Do you understand? There's purity in that. He was trying
following
to do
orders.
the right thing.
Yeah, you're a soldier.
Jesus appears to him, messes up his life, and he completely flips. The greatest executioner of the day of Christians becomes probably the greatest writer in the history of the Bible. I mean, he wrote more than anybody, I think. Right, Meeks, would you say?
Yeah.
He wrote more books than anybody.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, any comments on anything so far?
Back to what Horace was saying, or Charles. If Christians prior to Christ, so they've still been a Christian following Moses, or I thought that was all Jewish.
Well, what became the Christians, by
Gentiles.
and large, were the Hebrews. I mean, the Hebrews are just... Basically, the Hebrews haven't changed, but the people that believed that Jesus was the Messiah are now called Christians, but we were all Hebrews.
So these are those that believed before Christ.
Right.
Before Christ was here. I mean, before he revealed himself.
Who are these that, which ones are we talking? Like the people that lined up Jerusalem when Jesus walked in?
John the Baptist is baptizing people before he realized who Christ was. So he was still baptizing people to God.
there were
Holy Spirit. Right?
There is decent historical evidence. I mean, the Bible implies it, but there was a line of people that knew the day that the Messiah would be walking into Jerusalem, and they were lining the streets, the path that he used to enter, which was predicted, I think, in Isaiah or Daniel. So they knew where to be and what day to be there. And he did. Now, this one is easy to counterfeit, but he did go get a donkey and rode in on a donkey, which at the time I'm thinking, this makes no sense, but I totally understand why now. And the same thing that was going on then is going on today. Some people believe the Bible and some don't, because Satan was around then and he's still around today. And he's got an interest in us not believing it. So he's working on a big deception, which we're going to start to talk about, because NASA, I think, is a very big part of it.
Huge!
All right.
Hugely.
Meeks last week said Columbia is everywhere. It is.
Now, how bizarre is it that article just popped up on my Facebook page the next day?
Which one?
About the girl who posed for the Columbia pictures.
Oh, yeah.
Just random. I get on Facebook the day after we're speaking of this. Now, that ties into like how they're listening to us.
To your phones.
Yep.
If you're on alert a little bit.
Because, bam, there it was.
It could be more, but.
Or, I don't know how all this works, but I leave my YouTube playing at night, and I can't tell you how many answers I get. And it's funny, around 3 o'clock in the morning, I wake up, and all of a sudden, I know, that's when all the covens go send out all their people to go F with everybody.
I have to do the jazz hands when I say it.
This happened probably 30 times on our last show, where something wakes me up at 2 or 3 a.m., and I've got this thing, I got to write it down, and it'll be an hour, I get a whole show written, and I'm back asleep. And I remember being up, but I go back to read what I was, and I'm like, wow, I don't even remember writing that. Like, it's strange.
I write songs that way. A lot of times when I'm trying to go to sleep, my brain will just come up with a song. Okay,
Write it
I
down,
think your
get it
brain
out of your
becomes
head.
active when you're trying to shut it down. It goes into its own.
Well, whenever I try to fall asleep, I start to wake up. I should start drinking coffee at night to fall asleep.
Of course, it probably has a reverse effect.
Great idea. Okay, we all remember the Columbia disaster, correct?
Yep.
Space shuttle breaks up. We all saw the thing flying over Texas, yada, yada. All right, here's a little game here. I want you guys to write down, you're the editor of your local city's paper, all right? There's just been this shuttle disaster. I want you to write down the headline you're going to put in your paper, 5 words or less. I need each of you to do this.
What do we got to do? Yeah, I'm trying to fully understand, too. The headline of the shuttle incident.
So you're the editor of the newspaper. The space shuttle just crashed, okay? You are making the headline for tomorrow's paper. 5 words or less. It's going to be a big headline, obviously. This is a big event.
Okay.
What does the headline say?
There it is.
I don't know.
Teamwork.
Okay, Meeks, do you have a headline?
Disaster of the year, Columbia crashes. Although that's more
Okay,
than
that's
5 words.
okay, that's okay. Okay, so disaster of the year, Columbia crashes. Tony, what's yours?
Space shuttle explodes in flight.
Okay, what do we got over here?
Tragedy in U.S. NASA flight. I don't know.
Okay.
And the world is silent.
The world is silent.
That's
Now,
pretty good.
The world
no,
is a vampire,
no, we
though.
didn't give her time to write. Okay, 5 different right? Bunch of different headlines. That sounds reasonable.
Plausible. Yeah.
Now, I've seen this happen many, many times before. I just didn't know that it happened for the Columbia. So, remember, we've already talked about how the media is coordinated. They're owned by a single entity. There is
5.
I'm going to show you something that's beyond statistical probability, even if some of these newspapers are owned by the same parent company. Okay, San Diego Union Tribune. Columbia is lost, right? Sounds good. Chicago Tribune. The Columbia is lost. Los Angeles Times. Columbia is lost.
Wow.
There's the Union Tribune. Columbia is lost. The Times Union. Columbia is lost. The Times, Columbia lost. So then I get to George Bush, and I think this is what where your eye, people go, what does it mean you're spiritually waking? Or give me an example. This is an example. Because I come across, when I'm looking for this, it's, George Bush's speech about Columbia. And before I heard the speech, I already knew, what is he going to say in his speech, word for word?
Columbia is lost.
He is going to find a way to specifically say those words.
Columbia is lost.
He starts talking. I'm like, oh my God, he's not going to say it. And then he stops everything, moment of drama, and he says, the Columbia is lost. And I'm like, you little stinkers.
Oh, this was in his...
Correct. This is the second shuttle that blew up over Texas.
Gotcha.
The Challenger was over Florida.
Okay.
My fellow Americans, this day has brought terrible news and great sadness to our country. At 9 o'clock this morning, Mission Control in Houston lost contact with our space shuttle Columbia. A short time later, debris was seen falling from the skies above Texas. The Columbia is lost.
Interesting little things to notice like that. You guys remember the Phoenix Lights?
I do. Arizona.
I never verified this. I just trusted what Chuck Missler said about it. So check into it for yourselves. And I always say this. Do your own. Missler, Chuck Missler. Best teacher ever. He used to be the head of the River Rouge plant here in Detroit.
Okay.
He's a former Fortune 500 CEO. He went to UCLA, Navy man, engineering, PhD, CEO of Western Digital, military defense contractor.
Okay.
So, Bible's real, becomes a Bible, but he does it through science, man. It is... That is for me, my favorite of all time.
So what about it? What about the Phoenix Lights?
Phoenix Lights. This thing happens. You guys all remember? Does anyone not remember the Phoenix Lights?
I'm not too familiar
I'm
with
aware.
the Phoenix Lights.
The entire city of Phoenix goes nuts because this massive UFO, and I want to say it was 1997, Meigs.
It's pretty late.
Flies over the city, and everyone, the governor, doctors, everyone, there
Families.
is no effing doubt, and every local news station's covering it, but national store, not covering it, not covering it, not covering it. I want to say this happened in March of 97. But there's so much buzz going on. There's hundreds of news campers parked in Phoenix. National's not covering it, they're not covering it. And then suddenly, and I want to say it was June 26th of 1997, and I don't know why I'm giving you these dates, but I have a feeling that's it. If it is, that's from upstairs, because I don't even remember.
March 13th, 1997. Wow.
And when did the news come out? Maybe June 4th or something like that.
Oh.
And what happened is on the exact same day, every newspaper, every television station, every national network suddenly began to cover the story simultaneously at the exact same time.
At the press.
Let me remind you of there's a principle. According to Edmund Spencer, he articulated this. There's a principle which is a bar against all information. It's proof against all argument. And it's something which cannot fail to keep man in everlasting ignorance. And that principle is condemnation before investigation. So one of our challenges as we go into this very complicated topic is to set aside our prejudices and presuppositions, and let's see what we can find out. Now, the same idea is not only articulated by Edmund Spencer, but it also is in our collection of Proverbs by Solomon, who reminds us that he that answereth the matter before he heareth it, it is a folly and a shame unto him. So one of our challenges tonight is sort of set aside what we think we may have heard or what our basic prejudices are, and let's see what we can find out. On June 18th of 1997, there was a strange vehicle that appeared over Phoenix, Arizona. In fact, went over most of the state at about 30 miles an hour, which is very slow for an airborne vehicle. There were some that said they felt they could have hit it with a ball that seemed that close as it went over. And it created quite a stir. And on March 13th, there were sightings all the way from Casa Grande and Chandler all the way up through the northern part of the state, Prescott and so forth. So it wasn't just a local phenomenon. Even though there were denials by the Air Force, they saw the fighter jets sortie after them and so on, so it created quite a stir. It wasn't picked up in the national media. It was picked up, of course, substantially in the local media, that is in the state of Arizona. And one of the things that's strange about this is that it happened in March of 1997. It didn't show up until June 18th. And what's strange to me is not just the event that happened in March, but there was no word about it in the national media. But then for some reason, no obvious reason, on June 18th, it was on the front page of USA Today. That's where this picture came from. It was on NBC, CBS, CNN, all the major networks had this brief comment about what happened. What was puzzling about it didn't happen on June 18th, it happened back in March. And I haven't been able to determine what triggered the news media to make it a big event at that time. It's one thing it does demonstrate is how the news is managed, because all the networks pick it up at the same time for no ostensible reason.
The important thing to take of this is that our media is absolutely coordinated on what stories they will run and what stories they won't. And enough pressure developed where they had to address this, because not addressing it was starting to turn into the elephant in a room. All right, so origins of NASA. Meeks, what does NASA mean? The Syrian Aramaic, the Syriac version.
Okay.
Now, this
Actually,
would have probably been... Oh, go ahead.
Okay. It's kind of a misnomer or...
Just give me the two-word answer.
Okay, it means to deceive, but
Okay.
it that's not correct though. It's
Oh, really? Keep going. Then what does it mean?
But it's close. That's the point.
What does it mean?
Nasha means to deceive. It's not NASA, but it's close.
Okay. Okay, I got you. Just sort of interesting.
Yeah.
So a lot of people think NASA, the history begins in the whenever they were formed. 50s, 60s? Meigs, why don't you
late
figure that
50s, I think.
I thought it was late 50s.
Let me look it
What
up.
we have right now? Okay, we got, what, 20 minutes or so?
1958 is when it was.
58.
What year? 1958. Okay. I think you can actually track, because we are going to be covering NASA and what's in our skies. We're going to be on this for about 4 episodes here.
Awesome.
So it's going to take a while, because this is going to be, this is where so much of like the meat and potatoes is of what we talk about. So before the Holy Quran, Book of Enoch, something interesting happens in the Book of Enoch. My opinion is it's absolutely inspired by God. Some people may say otherwise. I'll defend the book later, but we're just playing here, and this is just my personal theory, all right? Tying all this together. The Book of Enoch does say, however, that the Watcher Angels, the one that corrupted all the DNA on Earth, that required God to essentially wipe this experiment out except for 8 people on that boat. How funny that there are 8 blood types today. They survive. He replenishes Earth. Kabam. Now, those 200 Watcher Angels had a very specific punishment. And a lot of people just group all demons together. And there are so many different kinds, and they're treated very differently, different responsibilities, different punishments in different places for different amounts of time. But these particular angels, which were the ones that brought the technology to Earth, the kind of technology, they literally talk about vibrations, and they don't mention magnets in the Bible. But I think they knew the technology that makes the water do what we just saw do. So God says your punishment is you are going to be locked up in chains for 70 generations. Now, there are different places. You can get a different generation. You can get it at 40 years, 70 years, or 100 years. You can make a case that there are different readouts for how long a generation is. But what's interesting is this happened right at the time of the flood, because their punishment basically came at flood time, because the flood happened because of what they did. And God was obviously this was a second rebellion in heaven.
And what the angels did, not man. Or
Well, he was mad at man too. I mean,
Gotcha.
or I should say he was grieved. That's what he said. And God, when I read that passage, my heart sank when God said he was sorry that he had made man because we were such F-ups. Still are.
Yeah.
Good catch.
But I
Locusts of the
think he
world.
is actually right now, because the angels are watching all of this unfold, and he's going to basically show how this bunch of Cretans, humanity, are going to get cleaned for heaven. And because he does that. He shows his glory by throwing these Hail Marys all the time. That's why I call him Hail Mary. He does it every single time. So these Watcher angels get locked up. Now, this would have been about 3000 BC, give or take, okay? And there are, of course, some geologists that say there was no flood and things like the Grand Canyon happened, a drop of water over 1 billion years. And then the other school that breaks from, hey, what the education mainstream taught us, they're like, no, actually, this whole thing this was immediate. It was, I mean, we got animals trapped that shouldn't be trapped together, blah, blah, things that just cannot be explained, that this does not hold water. 70 generations. At 70 years a pop is what? 4,900 years? 70 times 70? Come on, people. Thank you. All right. So if the flood's roughly 3000 BC, when do these Watcher angels get out? Meigs?
Ooh, that's a good question. I'm not sure the exact.
We don't have time to wait for you to figure it out. It would be 1900 AD.
Huh.
4,000. If you're in 3000 BC and they have to wait 4,900 years, it's 3,000 years to the year zero, and then another 1,900 years to 4,900, right? Well, that puts us at 1900. So here's what's interesting. And now these angels, these are the ones that this would have been right before the Tower of Babel. I mean, when I say right before, a few hundred years before. And we start to see their symbology everywhere. So what's interesting is 1900 rolls around, and we're basically an agrarian society. We don't really, there is an very industrial revolution. But who was into the occult in the 1920s and 30s? I mean, what was the biggest occultic country?
Wow.
Germany, maybe?
Yeah, Nazi Germany. All right? All over the occult. I mean, Hitler was certain that he was being visited by a divine being. Now, I believe he was being visited by a divine being, but it was a demonic one, not. And they can look like angels of light. Because Germany in 1923 is as powerful as Ethiopia today. Bankrupt, starvation, lines to get food. They've got inflation that is escalating at such a rate. If you get in line for a loaf of bread with $1 million, by the time you reach the front of the line, the loaf costs $5 million.
Yeah.
It was a decimated nation. Yet, within 10 years, that country went essentially from bicycles in 1923 to splitting the atom by the 1930s. They already had a nuclear program. And who were they getting funded by? Well, we know who they were getting funded by, right? The central bankers. The Prescott Bushes, the father Prescott Bush, who were on, again, they didn't start doing this recently. They've been doing it throughout history. They're on both sides of this war.
Ford, GM, IBM.
So the Nazis, this is still theory. So the Nazis do their thing. Okay, we're going to pick up with the Nazis in a minute. Now, we just went from 3000 BC, the origins of NASA. Now let's pick it up at 632 AD. What happened in 632 AD?
632 AD. I don't know.
I know this. I don't know this knowledge.
Quran comes out.
Okay.
So it's written over a long period of time. It's given to Muhammad, supposedly by God, through the angel. They call him Jibril. It's actually Gabriel is our name for him. And here again, for reasons we're not going to get into, I am heavily certain that Muhammad did, in fact, talk to a divine entity. Here again, it wasn't from heaven. This was demonic. And there's a prophecy in the Quran. So Muhammad is considered the prophet. And it's Surah 54, 1-3. Meigs, has anyone here ever read this before?
I have not read the Quran.
There are not very many prophecies in the Quran, and I am no Quran expert. Like, I basically picked it up, read a few passages, and researched. I cannot tell you how close to the Bible it is. We're going to look at a couple.
A lot about Jesus in there, I've heard.
Oh, he's all over it.
Yeah.
They're not trying to take Jesus out of the picture. They're just trying to steer the conversation that Jesus isn't the guy. He's one of the guys. And if you give me enough time, we're going to get there, but we're going to be tight. So in the Quran, there's this prophecy. It says, the hour has come closer and the moon has split. Then they that saw a miracle, but they turned away and said, old magic. They disbelieved, followed their own opinions, and adhered to their old traditions. Okay. Now, my opinion is, this right here is evidence that Satan himself was working on a faked moon landing that he knew would be fake back in 632 AD. And I'm going to tie it into something that is just one of those things. I mean, really? Can this really be a coincidence? Really? And I'm going to read you the transcript from the book. Muslims believe the Quran was revealed by God to Muhammad by the angel Gabriel from December of 609 through 632 AD when Muhammad died. This is one of the few prophecies in the Quran. Chapter 54 is titled The Moon, and it indicates the splitting of the moon is a sign that the end of the world is drawing close. Some people, where was I? Some people believe that when the Apollo 11 astronauts picked up that lunar rock and the orbiter departed the moon was when that prophecy was fulfilled. A lot of people already think we're in the last days. Now, here's what's super interesting. Because that, now, and you will find this is predictive program, this might be corroborative programming. So this appeared in Surah 54:1, okay? That at some point in the future, part of the moon is going to leave the moon. It's going to split. It's going to be torn apart. Doesn't say the amount. It's not in half necessarily. So when the time that NASA announced to the world in 1969, when this orbiter pops off the little launch pad, and somehow there's a cameraman to follow the thing up there, which we'll talk about later. Or they had servos installed in that camera, but they didn't for the next 2 missions, but then they whatever. It was 17:54 and 1 second universal time, which at NASA HQ, Cape Canaveral, Florida, the East Coast, it was 1:54 p.m. in the afternoon, 1:54 and 1 second. That was the official time reported by NASA. It was at 54:1 on the 54th minute and the first second of the hour, which is right in the same. That's just sort of. So from a Muslim perspective,
got it.
Holy cow! This means our book is legitimate, because guess what is circulating now in the Muslim world is that, hey, we can trust our God. He can do these types of prophecies, and he got it down to the minute. But if you can start to understand that now, and what does the rest of it say? Then they saw a miracle, but they turned away and said old magic. See, I think that's what we are, because we don't necessarily believe we really went to the moon. And I think it was done with, i.e., maybe what is called old magic in 632 AD is special effects today.
We're going to have to remember where we were because we have to cut it up.
All right, we're going to pick this up then. We're going to pick this up at the Quran in this passage. We're going to show some other passages that start to talk about, and I read it right underneath this passage. If you see the two little we's at the bottom, you start to see where the name Jesus is being replaced by Jesus is one of us. He is a we, which matches the ascended master's story that we're getting through thousands of channeling specialists all over Earth over the last 20 or 30 years.
Thank you to everybody who listened.
Wow.
And
You
watched
guys,
today.
at the end of the day, all of this stuff, you got to find out. It doesn't matter how close you come if you don't go all the way. Jesus is not one of the good guys. He's not one of the best. That is not even a possibility to choose from. He is either the Son of God, he was insane, or he was a liar. Those are your only three choices. And your eternal soul depends on what your thoughts are about that.
All right.
And we'll leave it at that, and we will
Great.
be
We'll be back next week.
Yes.
Take
Boom.
care.
Love you guys.
Bye, Meeks. Bye.
Adios, amiga.
What I'm about to say is fact. The secret organizations of the world power elite are no longer secret. They have planned and are now leading us into a one-world communism.
ODDTV. Take a journey with me deep inside the rabbit hole. Wake up, my friends, there's some things that you have to know. Everything you ever thought you knew, it has to go. For instance, NASA is the world's largest magic show. 9/11 was a planned demolition and Sandy Hook was a scam. Come on, man, are you tripping? Constant programming being crammed in your vision. Just take a step back and examine this prison. Turn on the news and they're trying to blind you. All they ever do is tell you lies and divide you. There's nowhere you can even hide, they'll find you. Illuminati all-seeing eye right behind you. It's about time you find out we're being lied to. They're attempting to control the mind that's inside you. Hide you from the power that designed you. Does anybody have a problem with this? Well, I do. I want the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. They say they got it.